Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to For StarCraft 2 Strategy. Today we're going to be taking a look at a Protoss strategy. Now in this replay, our Protoss player is Saki, and our Terran opponent is Maro. I'm going to go right into Saki vision here. So again, this is a Protoss strategy, and more specifically, we're going to be looking at a 2-gate Robo build. Pretty standard build versus Terran, and it opens up a lot of options to tech either into Colossi or Immortal, and then transitioning into Stargates to get Phoenixes. Now, the purpose in doing so is that our Terran opponent ends up going for this Marine Banshee build, and then after scouting between probes, stalkers, and eventually with our observer, after scouting that our opponent is going for this build, that's when we decide to tech into that Stargate to get that Phoenix play. So we're going to take a look at just the basics of this build, how it's done, and why we make that transition that we do make. And again, that main purpose is to deal with those Banshees, but we're going to just show you the thought process behind that. I'm going to be starting out with a pretty basic build order, that 9 Pylon and a 12 Gateway, followed by a 14 Assimilator. Nothing too unordinary there. That 9 Pylon has, of course, already gone down, and that 12 Gateway will be coming up just right about now. So now moving into our opponent's base, just going to be moving in to get some scouting. Obviously, at this moment, we can see there's no trickery going on. We don't need to expect a proxy barracks or anything. He is building a barracks in his main base. Pretty standard stuff so far from the Terran opponent. As I've said before, no reason to really leave their base. You can keep up the scouting information up until that first Marine comes on the board. Might as well get as much information as you can from your opponent while available. Also, another great thing you can do against Terran players, not so great if you are the Terran player, but a great thing you can do is harass those workers that are trying to build. Best case scenario, you end up killing worker. Worst case scenario, you at least become a nuisance for the beginning of the game. Now back into our base, we're going to take a look at what's going on here. This gateway is just coming in right now. We do have that Assimilator up again. That Assimilator went down to 14 supply, gateway went down to 12. Second Pylon just warping in right now, going to be getting our Cybernetics Core as well at 17 supply. So obviously not a 2-gate build here. We're going just that 1 gateway into Cybernetics Core. Again, this is going to be a 2-gate Robo build. That, again, opens up a lot of options. It lets us get that observer out really early for that vital scouting information. Also, again, allows you to tech into Immortals if you have a Marauder-heavy army from your Terran opponent, or it allows you to get that Robotics Bay and tech up to Colossi if you have more of a Marine-heavy build from your opponent. So lots of different options, lots of things to consider. Either way, going to be pretty gas-intensive. Protoss is very gas-intensive beyond that 4 Warpgate build, and even that is pretty gas-intensive if you try to go Sentry-heavy. So getting that Assimilator pretty early, going to be really standard. That went down to 18 supply. Dropping this additional Pylon right here. Now, starting out the game, we're going to be warping in some Stalkers. We did, with our scouting probe, we didn't see any early pressure, so that is why we didn't have to worry about coming out with an early Zealot. That's the other great thing about staying in your opponent's base or staying near your opponent's base in the beginning of the game. You can tell if early pressure is coming, and that's going to tell you if you need to make that early Zealot, or if you can just hold back, work on your economy, and then just get that Stalker out as soon as your Cybernetics Core is finished. Now that we have our Cybernetics Core in, we're going to be dropping down our Robotics Facility. We're going to be immediately getting an Observer once that comes up as well. So taking a look down here, moving forward with our Stalker, we're going to try to keep up the pressure as well as that scouting information. Going to be moving in, basically see what kind of damage we can do, see what we can see. Another great thing too about early game Stalker pressure is that as long as you're able to pull your Stalker back once they lose their shields, try not to let them get too low in health. You can just let them recharge and push back in and continue to attack their units. Great thing is, until they get medevacs up on the board, if you continue this harassment, you can whittle down their forces before your first big engagement, and you won't take many losses, again, as long as you pull back before you lose those shields. Now, I'm going to take a look back at our base. We do have a few things going on. This Warpgate research is coming in right now. Now, we started researching that at 23 supply. Also, the second gateway going down. Drop that at 33 supply. Now that our Robotics Facility is up, we're going to get that Observer so we can get a good look inside of their base. Obviously, we have been poking at the front of their base. Now that this bunker is up, though, now that we've seen this bunker, we're not going to be able to push in with Stalkers or a probe anymore. So getting that Observer is going to be vital to see what our opponent is doing. Warpgate research has just finished, and the second gateway is just about in now. So again, we're going to be producing mainly out of these 2 gateways as far as our Warpgate units are concerned. Not going to be transitioning into a 3rd gateway, just because off of 1 base, we don't have the resources necessary to maintain much more than this, as well as our Robotics Facility. And now you may wonder why we're kind of sitting on minerals at this point and Vespian. Reason is, with Warpgate research, at any point you can just dump these by warping in units quickly onto the field. The other thing too is we really want to get a good idea of what our opponent's doing before we make any major decisions. Now we did see a lot of Marines, that is why we're getting that Robotics Bay, but as you can see, moving in with our observer, and this is where we're going to really decide what we're going to do as soon as we get our scouting information with our observer. And right there at that very moment we saw these Banshees. We see a lot of Marines and a Banshees, so what we're going to be seeing from our opponent is a Marine Banshee build. Pretty popular build, can be very strong. Our response to that is immediately to get the Stargate. In fact, if you look at the timing, if you go ahead and watch this replay over yourself, the link of course is in the video description, you will see as soon as we saw those Banshees, as soon as those Banshees went on the board, we were going to go ahead and drop that Stargate. This is just another example of reactionary play. Not making any major game decisions. I mean, obviously, of course, we start out with that 2-gate Robo, but that's just a pretty solid build against Terran in general. But no major decisions are made until we know exactly what our opponent's doing. And again, we see this Marine Heavy, we saw those Banshees, so we're going to be getting out this Colossi. Also, the Stargate, once this is up, we're going to start researching our Phoenix, and there you go, you can see it's coming in right now. Now, our opponent is doing some factory scouting. This is going to be pretty detrimental to us because of the large hit pool in this factory. He's going to get almost a full scout of our base. A little bit misfortunate, but still, this build is going to be very solid against that Marine Banshee build, and as you will see in just a moment when we do have an engagement between these two armies. So as you can see, there's that heavy amount of Banshees. We also had those heavy amount of Marines. Getting a lot of Zealots, pretty Zealot robust army with it backed up by this Colossi, and then these Phoenixes to deal with the Banshees. This is going to be a very solid unit composition against that Marine Banshee build. So again, if you're a Protoss player, you open the game up with a pretty standard 2-gate Robo build against Terran, and then you see this Marine Banshee build. Go ahead and drop a Stargate, transition into Phoenix, try to get that Colossi on the board as well, and then just kind of go Zealot heavy, and that's going to do really well against this build. And here we go, this is going to be the engagement. Key thing too is to kite these Phoenixes around as much as possible. Their speed and mobility should be able to allow you to kite them away from the Marines as they try to fire up at them, and then just pick off these Banshees basically. That's what you're going to be looking to do. And ideally, of course, you do want to keep your Phoenix back, take advantage of that long range that they have, try to keep them away from the Marines, and between that, if they do focus fire on this Colossi, if the Marines do focus fire on this Colossus, the Zealots are pretty much just going to run up to them and ruin their day at that point. I'm going to be moving down, try to take a look at what our opponent has. He is going for this expansion, which I don't think was the wisest decision, especially since that engagement did not go very well for the Terran player. Had it gone in their favor, this expansion would have been a better idea, but of course we were able to take them out, and this counter push is going to be just too much for them to handle. Pushing forward, and as you can see, that's pretty much that. Our Terran player, Morrow, does call a good game. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at that build order real quick. Again, like I said, we're just starting the game out with that standard 2-gate Robo. Some people may wonder, well, why don't you go 4-gate Robo? Well, again, like I said earlier, off of one base, you don't really have the resources to maintain much more than a 2-gate and then the production out of the Robotics Facility, especially if you want to leave up the option to get that Stargate just in case you do see Banshees. Again, you don't go into the game and be like, okay, he might be going Marine Banshee, so I'm going to go 2-gate Robo immediately into Stargate. That's not how we play this. You go 2-gate Robo, that is a solid build against Terran. You make your units out of those buildings based on what you see. Again, had we saw a Marauder heavy army from our Terran player, we would have gotten Immortals out of here. There would have been not much of a need to get this Robotics Bay so early. But we did see a lot of Marines, so we do decide, of course, that we're going to be getting this Robotics Bay to get these Colossi, and then we saw those Banshees, and that's when we made that decision to get this Stargate. Going to go over that build order. Start off with a 9 Pylon, going to follow that up with a 12 Gateway. 14 supplies when we got our Assimilator here. At 17 supply, we dropped our Cybernetics Core. 18 is when we got our second Assimilator. Again, very gas intensive, especially trying to produce units out of this Robotics Facility. Going to use a lot of gas, so definitely need to get that second Assimilator. 23 supply, started researching that Warpgate research. 27 is when we dropped down our Robotics Facility. 33, our second Gateway came down. 39, our Robotics Bay. Again, that was after we saw that Marine Heavy Army decided that getting Colossus on the board would be very beneficial. And then at 44, that's when our Observer had scouted into our opponent's base. We saw those Banshees, and then we immediately dropped that Stargate. So once again, guys, this has been for StarCraft 2 Strategy. If you guys like our videos and you like what you see here, please do go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Keep watching and keep owning, guys. Now, Here's one major point that I did want to talk about. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be discussing charging your lasers. Void Rays, very, very strong, especially when charged up. Now, one of the problems is, against Marines early game, 1 or 2 Void Rays aren't going to do a whole lot. If you don't manage to get your Void Ray charged up, you're basically going to get obliterated by the Marines before you do enough damage to take care of them.